Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano, as well as the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. Today's video is maybe a little bit weird. It really goes off the tracks. If you're a new jazz student, this probably isn't for you. If you are just kind of interested in some alternate ways of thinking about chords and harmony and improvising and life, then this one might be for you. I'm going to give you some context. So I transcribed this little solo by a pianist named Kit Downs. I'm actually hoping to have Kit on the channel eventually. And I just found it to be such an interesting solo. I'm going to put it up on the screen. You're not going to be able to read it because it's really just from me. But if you want to try to kind of follow along, you can. This is how I write when I write just for me. It's not really very legible, but it sounds like this, something like this. Something, and then it goes off in a different direction. All right, some of you probably hate that. It certainly doesn't sound like bebop. I don't think Barry Harris would approve. But I just thought it was cool because it was so far outside of the bounds of anything that that I deal with. And looking at it, my first instinct as a jazz theory nerd guy is to look for something like scales. Personally, I'd have a really hard time identifying scales and connecting them in any way to the chords. And so as I started to think of some alternate ways of connecting with this and thinking, how would you come up with something like this? I was reminded of a strategy that the pianist Jason Moran gave me a long time ago. If you're not familiar with Jason Moran's music, he's an incredible pianist, visionary, has done really interesting projects around Jelly Roll Morton, etc. But one of the things he told me that a group of musicians in New York was experimenting with was thinking of chords as fewer notes, okay? I know that's weird, but let me talk you through it a little bit. So let me get this off of my screen here, and let's maybe do something like this. All right, so when you have a chord, let's take C major 7, it comes with a ton of information, right? In jazz, not only, of course, do we have the 1, 3, 5, and 7, but, this chord symbol implies a 9th and a 13th. So you're kind of locked into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes, and then you maybe get to choose one to create a scale, right? If you got 6 out of 7 notes, then okay, we could have an F to make our major scale. We could have an F sharp to make Lydian, which we do sometimes in major chords. And that's pretty much it. That's all the choice you have, right? Because jazz chords just come with all this information. Same thing, we have a D minor 7. Of course, we have the 1, 3, 5, 7. But then usually this also comes with a 9th and 11th and maybe a 13th, although we might have a choice. You might be able to fiddle around with that 13th is, but you're really locked into a scale. This has to be Ionian or Lydian. This has to be Dorian or Aeolian. Okay. Now, here's the part where maybe it's going to get weird. But think about, let's pretend you're playing in a trio. Okay? Bass, piano, drums. So what is actually happening to show that that's a C major chord in that trio? Probably the bass player's playing C. Maybe he's also playing E on another beat. Maybe he's playing G. But actually, all the rest of the power to define that chord lies in your hands. So one of the things that we can do is, instead of stacking up all these upper extensions and locking ourselves into a scale, is that we can consider fewer notes and then improvise against those. So in this solo, Kit Downs is only playing 3 notes most of the time in the left hand. And then it leaves all these cracks for him to get in different ways. Okay, so let me show you like how this would actually work. Maybe first, let's just ponder this question. And again, this is getting really weird, philosophical, spiritual. If you're still with me, thank you. But like, if we have this chord, right, here's a traditional C major 7 with a 13th and a 9th. You know, notes are clearly going to be defined as dissonant or consonant. Right? So we mostly are going to want to avoid those notes. But if we go back to, let's just take it at one note. Notes have different pulls against that C, but I feel like I could use all 12 pitches, you know, improvising against this. And what if I use, let's say, just C and A? You could think of this as the root and the sixth of a C6, but let's actually literally just think of this as a C and an A. Like, okay, that's kind of dissonant. Some of you are like, doesn't sound like jazz. I hate it. But what I'm trying to do is get back to like this basic principle of what sorts of sounds can we make against just a couple of notes. And this isn't just a useless exercise. As we play a chord progression or a tune, we could actually take this approach as well. So let's just start with a 2-5-1, D minor 7, G7, C major. Okay, so obviously, usually, I know a lot of scales and arpeggios that I could play against those three chords, right? Dorian, mixed Lydian, Ionian, Dorian, altered, Lydian, whatever. But now I want to take this progression and just assign 2 notes per chord. So let's, and I'm not going to try to do like the 3rd and the 7th, you know, in this super tonal way. I'm going to choose G and A to represent the D minor 7. There's not really a like particular strategy here. And I'm not going to make it resolve properly. That A flat does want to pull down to G, but I'm going wild, guys. So now instead of, I've picked 2 notes with against which to improvise. Okay, I could still do Dorian. That A flat's the flat 9 of the G7, right? So I'd have to use some kind of a more colorful scale, like a half octatonic or altered. So I could still play quote unquote normally, but I could also experiment with some of those cracks in the harmony, like Kit Downs does in that solo. Yeah, I really try to get myself out of that C major mindset and think, well, what goes with A and G? Maybe a A7 goes with A and G, right? Maybe F major goes with A and G. maybe even a D major kind of, like a D sus sound goes with A and G, or E flat Lydian. And when I hear that E and D, I really think of E7, but I'm trying to think of what else I could do there. Could be like B flat Lydian, or like B flat dominant 7th sharp 11. Now, you might say, well, this is just going to be a mess. And in some ways, you're right. And you could say that kit down solo is a mess if you don't like it. But now I'm going to try to put this into practice. Let me pull up a chart for tune-up. A nice tune with a lot of 2-5-1s. And of course, I'm having technical difficulties, so I'll try to do something live. Happens every time. This is just a different way to potentially work through this. So I'm going to choose G and B, kind of basic. And I'm going to choose the F sharp here, the 13th, and B flat. I'll do the flat 9 again, and then F sharp and B. And then let's see, we'll do it just like we did originally for this 2-5-1 in C. Right, these are the notes that I just chose. And then I'm going to choose a half step here, which is always kind of fun. And that's going to go to a little whole step. I am using alter tones on these dominants. I think that's kind of nice. And we'll do some contrary motion. And that's getting low, so maybe I'll have this one jump up to F sharp to G, and then to F to G. All right, this is pretty slapdash, but now I've got little 2-note, I don't want to call them shells because that's an official term. I've got 2-note little seeds for each of these chords. So you probably don't hear tune-up in that. I don't hear tune-up in that. So if you want to play bebop, don't do this. But if you want to play something a little bit more out, then I'm going to just improvise. I'm not going to think about these chords at all. I'm going to think about these 2 notes and just improvising something that appeals to me against these 2 notes. So that was tune-up. Was it weird? Sure. But sometimes we want to improvise something weird. Let me do another version. So now I'm going to try to play the bass. I won't play the 2 group, but I'm going to just be thinking about the 2 group. And that's how I'm going to be improvising in my right hand. So you can see how this might form an out-sounding solo that has some connection still through those 2 notes and through my subconscious probably to the overall chords of tune-up. So... lot of multitasking to think really differently in the left hand and the right hand. Of course, if you're in the trio, the bass player is playing the roots, and therefore, you might play that 2-note grouping in your left hand. You don't have to multitask like I did. So if you're just tired of what you're playing, if you want to play more outside of the changes, this could be a fun way for you to get started. Now, if you dig this kind of thing, you like thinking about playing out, I think this book, the third volume of Jazz Piano Fundamentals, the subtitle is Modal and Modern. This includes a lot of ways to get outside or to the kind of edges of the chord changes. So I would check that one out. That's Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 3. You can get it at jeremysiskind.com or at amazon.com. Thank you for watching. Since we were playing tune-up, if you've watched the end, use the word tune. Could be T-U-N-E, could be T-O-O-N. You guys are creative. Go for it. I appreciate you checking this video out.